Welcome to AntArctic Stories, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes into the rich world of people who live, work, and undertake daring expeditions in the polar regions. My name is Heather Thorkelson, and I'll be your host today. Alexia Spencer is a circular economist who's lived all over the world, only to end up near the North Pole. From a young age, her family showed her the value of local economies in a globalized world, and how sustainability and profitability were not opposite concepts. That left a profound impression on young Lexi, who went on to develop projects for digital services, education, tourism, and manufacturing, all with a strong focus on innovation and creating solid businesses that also benefit society. Having grown up exposed to different languages, cultures, and cuisines, she took on the challenge of living on cruise ships and aboard a sailing boat in order to seek adventure, but found that her passion was to help build a community that can withstand the challenges of the future. After 3 summers creating projects to tackle issues and explore niches in northern Norway, she left Arctic Norway's milder regions and her community in the Lofoten Islands to join the restructuring of Polar Permaculture in Longyearbyen, Svalbard. Polar Permaculture Solutions, AS, was founded in 2013 by Benjamin Vidmar, a chef who realized that access to fresh food in Svalbard was scarce and unsustainable. He decided to do something to change that and founded a company that today produces microgreens, salads, culinary herbs, and ornamental flowers that supply local restaurants and are available to consumers through Svalbard Butikken, the local supermarket. Polar Permaculture seeks to innovate by creating techniques and methodologies for sustainability and growing food in extreme or isolated environments. They are currently running a composting pilot in Longyearbyen and seek to establish a zero-waste restaurant pilot through the Food E project. Ben is still the CEO, but he is now supported by Alexia Spencer and Carlotta Querzal as his heads of operation and production, and has the expertise of a diverse and qualified board. Polar Permaculture hopes to create a community where nothing goes to waste and everyone has access to local, nutritious food. Alexia Spencer, welcome to AntArctic Stories.
Hi, Heather. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to be interviewing you today because I've been up in Longyearbyen so many times walking past that greenhouse out there on the tundra and thinking, who decided to grow vegetables up here? This is such an awesome concept. And the fact that it's been around for a long time and, is quite successful. I'm just so excited to dive in and ask you about the inception of this and how things are going. Now, of course, it was Benjamin Vidmar that started Polar Permaculture Solutions, and I'm wondering if you can share with us, what was it that brought Ben to think, yes, this is exactly what I need to be doing up here in Longyearbyen?
Who knows what goes on in Ben's head, right? Because he is a visionary and he is a person that innovates in his daily life. So I cannot tell you what sparked his first thought, but I can tell you that once he got into Longyearbyen living a little bit, he realized that the quality of the greens that he was getting as a chef did not match up to his expectations. So I think it was a mix of vision and sheer necessity that brought him to start experimenting with growing food in the Arctic. So since Ben was a chef and he was used to the highest quality produce to serve to his customers, when he couldn't find that produce, he decided, I can grow this myself. So that was the first step. Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, that's a real entrepreneur right there, right? You see a gap in the market and you think, I'm going to fill it.
Yeah, and he comes up with amazing ideas, on a regular basis. So some people are just powerhouses, I think, for those kinds of innovation.
For sure. And, I'm all the time that I eat in restaurants in Longyearbyen, I'm always amazed at how fresh things are. And I'm sure that that's a direct result of the work that he's doing. So that's amazing. So how did you hear about and get involved with the company?
Yeah, so I did a lot of sustainability projects at uni, and I've always been interested in food security, and especially food security in extreme environments. And I was living in on the mainland, pardon, about 2 years ago, and I had heard of polar permaculture before, but my best friend showed me the dome, right? The famous dome, which is the greenhouse you referred to earlier. And they had a volunteering program, and I kind of considered that, but at that moment it wasn't the right fit for me. And what happened in October last year is that it became the right fit for me, and I got in touch with Ben, and I moved to Longyearbyen in about a week.
Wow.
After that first contact, because Ben is very, if he likes you and if he likes your CV, for example, he jumps on board,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's great to have a CEO that has that vision and that encouragement. So within a week, I was consulting for Polar Permaculture in Longyearbyen. I moved up from Lofoten in Nordland, and then and here I am. Now I've taken over daily operations of the company from the 1st of January.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
I know. It's been a journey.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Okay, so I'm sure the listeners are wondering, what is it? What are the primary produce that you produce, that you grow, and what dictates which ones you grow the most of?
Yeah. You know what? Going back to a previous question, I think polar permaculture has contributed a lot to the morale of the town when it comes to what we expect to get up here, but also but the logistics systems have improved a lot. So at the moment, for example, with the pandemic, we do not actually supply most of the greens in Longyearbyen. It's important to say that.
Okay.
But we do have microgreens, which have always been kind of the staple crop for Ben since the beginning. We have culinary herbs, which are also soil based, but we are experimenting with hydroponics. And then we have ornamental flowers and other plants. We have chili plants and sunflowers now, which are very cute.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so we're experimenting with different markets, but the core of the business has always been the microgreens. And now we have hydroponic equipment which grows leafy greens such as kale and spinach, and a lot of salad, so lettuce and arugula, for example.
Okay. So
Yeah.
are the production systems that you're using, do they have the potential to start replacing some of what's brought up from the mainland?
Well, they certainly do. The potential is there, and they are commercial systems. But I think it's not so much the system, but the infrastructure around it that needs to be well thought. We received a grant from the European Union, so through the Horizon 2020 Innovation Grant, because we were part of a project called Foodie. And through that project, we received the funding to purchase this new commercial grade equipment, and of course run the zero waste pilot, which I suppose you want to hear about a bit later.
Definitely.
So there is definitely the potential to supply the whole of Longyearbyen as long as we have the infrastructure. But of course, in the Arctic, it is a bit challenging to find contained environments to place the machines in where they don't get damaged, for instance.
Right. So that leads me to one of the questions that I actually got from a listener who knew that we were interviewing you today and wanted to know, where do you get your seeds and what actually grows best under the conditions that you have there in the dome?
It's surprising. I'm gonna have to disappoint you because at the moment the dome is deactivated. It's gonna, yeah, it's gonna get moved to a new location, and that's a really exciting project. But I can't give away too much yet.
Okay.
So we're doing most of our growing indoors. We have a place we call the lab, and we get our seeds from a Norwegian supplier, and it's a big supplier. and it's the highest quality seeds that we found in the market. But in terms of what grows best, it's really surprising what does well up here, you know. Sometimes you get a really hardy plant, a temperate plant, and it doesn't do well. And then you get coriander, which is supposed to be tropical, and it grows beautifully. So
Wow.
it's, yeah, and it depends when you're growing indoors. It depends a lot on the microclimate that you create, right?
Hmm.
Because you can make the environment more humid, you can make it drier, you can make it colder, warmer. So what grows best is it depends on the way you set up your controlled environment, not necessarily how the weather is outside.
Of
So that's
course.
the beauty of growing food up here.
Right, of course. And I'm so happy to hear that coriander grows so well, and also a little bit jealous because I only kill my coriander. My greatest joy in life is coriander. I wish I could grow it, and I always kill it. So I need to get some tips from you.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people say that, oh, I can't grow plants on my kitchen bench. How do you do it on a large scale? But yeah,
It's called a microclimate.
it's called a microclimate. So if you're cooking around your plants a lot, they might not be too happy.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously the microgreens and the herbs, they are supplying the local restaurants. Are there any other local partners that you have that you supply besides the restaurants in Longyearbyen?
Well, we do sell at Coop, right? At
Okay.
Svalbard butikken. So we have a little corner that Coop is expanding. So at some point, they're going to have built out a large portion of their store. And we are really preparing to be able to serve this consumer market for people to be able to buy their locally grown salads at Coop. So right now we even have we have a hydroponic tower at Coop, so people can get the salad as fresh as it comes. They can just pick the lettuce, the head of lettuce that they want to take home, and pluck it straight out of the hydroponic tower. So that's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so I love that. It's not just exclusive to restaurants, but it's actually in the grocery store that locals can come in and buy stuff from you.
But it's also that what the restaurants want and what the consumer wants are completely different things, right?
Yeah, right.
So we definitely have to experiment and create different segments as we move forward.
Right, absolutely. And that makes me wonder about surplus. I mean, do you ever have a surplus problem of any of your produce, and if so, what do you do with that?
Yeah, we sometimes do. Right now we have a lot of kale that it was just too much, and we need to use that system for herbs because we're experimenting with this beautiful hydroponic dill, which is just amazing. And for different plants, we have different solutions. Some can be frozen, some can go into preserves. At Smock Svalbard last year, Ben ran a workshop where he preserved some food that was about to spoil, and that was really delicious. But for the kale, for example, we thought of making pesto,
Uh-huh.
just local kale pesto. And so for different produce, there are different solutions, right?
Right.
And I think that's where having a chef and a biologist and an economist really comes in handy because we can brainstorm on what the best solution is.
So this dovetails beautifully into this concept that I know everyone at Polar Permaculture Solutions is passionate about, which is this idea of the circular economy and how moving towards a circular economy model can move everyone towards a greater degree of sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about that for the folks listening who don't know what that is?
Yeah, of course. So the circular economy is not some big mystery. And it's interesting because our grandparents were already doing it, right? They had the milkman deliver the milk bottles to their door. And when they were done with it, the milkman would take the bottles back and refill them, right? And at some point, we just decided that it was too much work to do that. We were just going to throw the milk bottle in the garbage, and then we would have to carry the garbage to another container. And so it's all a question of perspective. And what the circular economy is nothing more than trying to not produce waste. And waste is expensive. A lot of companies think that it's so expensive to go green. And as a circular economist, I say, no, it's the opposite, because once you have your systems well in place, then you have less waste of resources, and that translates into better profitability to your company. So it's an argument that goes both in favor of the environment and in favor of a long-term economy. Mm-hmm. And to give you an example of what we are doing here in Longyearbyen is we're now running a composting pilot. So at the moment, all of the organic garbage in Longyearbyen, so that's leftovers for food and everything that comes from the environment gets thrown into the ocean.
Okay.
And people have these garbage disposal features in their sinks like they do in the US, and they just throw it all down the drain, and they think that's sustainable. And at a point in Longyearbyen's history, that was probably the best option. But now there are a lot of things going on around Svalbard, and perhaps it's not the best thing in the future to be dumping this sewage into the ocean, right?
Right.
So we are running in partnership with Stornorska, which is the mining company run by the government, a pilot where we take some of the garbage produced by their workers, and we compost that, and we find uses for the compost in Longyearbyen. So if we ever had to export that waste, that might not be so circular, but it will still be better than just dumping all the waste into the ocean. So circular is making small changes and finding solutions for what you have in your community. And it can be done in a small scale and in a large scale. So when you brew your coffee at home, you have the coffee grinds. Why not put it on your plants? Plants love coffee. It has a lot of nutrients. So you can think really small in terms of your own personal waste, or you can think big. Let's make this Arctic environment as pristine as possible.
That's so interesting. And what came up for me was this concept of like Arctic homesteading.
Exactly.
Like, what did people do back in the days? Well, they made jam out of stuff that was surplus. They put their coffee grounds on their plants. And I'm like, yeah, this is Arctic style homesteading type stuff, And it's almost like, as you say, going back to what our grandparents did, going back to old knowledge, older wisdom, and implementing that and not seeing that as a drain on society or as an economic drain or a pain in the butt, but actually something that can benefit everybody and benefit the environment and make things function better.
Yeah, and also because things are so much easier for us. If our ancestors wanted to compost something, they would have to dig a hole in the ground, and all we have to do is put our bio bag in the machine,
Yeah. Yeah, we have technology on our side.
Exactly. So it's not as hard as people think, but it does take a big mindset shift. And but I'm so excited for the future and to see what solutions people come up with, because if you look at Alaska and in other places, there is a lot of Arctic homesteading already. Mm-hmm. There is this woman that we collaborated with, and she made a documentary called First We Eat. Have you heard of it?
No, but I want to go watch it now.
Yeah, it's from Canada, I think. Yeah, so it's not from Alaska, it's from Canada. And it's basically her growing food in Yukon, which is an Arctic province in Canada. So it's possible, and they were circular and they were sustainable. They grew their own food 100 years ago. So why can't we do it now?
Yeah, and do it better because we have things available to us that weren't available then.
Exactly.
What would you say have been the biggest challenges that Polar Permaculture Solutions faces in moving towards these objectives?
I think you caught me on this one, Heather. It's a series of environment of challenges. Pardon. So being on an island so far north, everything that we need to order takes 3 months to arrive. Unless it's
Wow.
something really small that can be sent by plane. It's really difficult to get things up here if they're big machinery or. So the distance is a problem, and the fact that it's so isolated from
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the world. But we are lucky we have the flights. And then the other thing that sometimes can be a challenge in an environment like this one is that the legislation, the laws,
Hmm.
they are from 50 years ago, right?
Oh,
So they are from right at this point where people moved on from producing their own food and clothes, and the idea was that the best thing would be for other people to produce things and we would just buy them from them, right?
right, right.
It's yeah, so then the laws are kind of stuck in time in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the government is doing their absolute best to change the law as things come up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before there was no Svalbard brewery because you were not supposed to brew alcohol in Longyearbyen. But
Right.
that got changed, and then polar permaculture came into the picture, and then the law had to be adapted to allow for food production up here. So you see, the challenges are both in terms of logistics and in terms of what the regulations permit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, those are big hills to climb. No doubt. Did people think, or do people think that you folks that are involved in Polar Permaculture Solutions, do they think locally that you're crazy, or do you have a lot of support? Like, what's the general feeling about what you're up to with this growing food production company?
Yeah, I think absolutely people think that they just wonder, because nowadays you can get some salad up here and it's not the best quality. You're going to get a lot of mushy leaves,
Mm.
but you can get a head of lettuce, even if it's not the best, most nutritious,
Mhm.
freshest head of lettuce. So people are just wondering, why would you go through all this trouble? But I think I think that for us is no trouble at all. We are excited, and I think that's what generates then the other side, which are all the supporters, people who do get it, who are like, yeah, we need to be independent. And I think the Corona crisis really taught us a lot about that.
Yeah.
That when trade stops for a little bit, even if nations are at peace, there are other things that can interrupt or food system, and I think that's also why we're so excited about this foodie project, because we're working with partners from other countries and we can teach people about local food systems to think global but eat local, and the supporters of polar permaculture, I think, are amazing. We get so many emails every day, and that's part of what keeps us going.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's fantastic. That's really, really good to
Yeah.
hear that,
Mm.
slowly people are starting to shift their thinking around this and that support is increasing. That's very, very wonderful to hear. I just have a couple more questions. One of them is from, again, someone who is a listener of the podcast who knew that we would be interviewing you today and wanted to know what new produce you plan to try. And a second question on top of that is, can you grow other crops such as proteins and grains?
Right. That's a very exciting question. Perhaps our biologist should be here. But since she's not, I'll do my best. We currently are growing things that we had not grown before, because we just got these the hydroponic equipment, right, that I was mentioning before. So we are growing really beautiful heads of lettuce and kale. We had never grown kale before. And so this hydroponic system is going to open up a lot of things for us. And what we are going to grow in just a tiny bit once the seeds arrive are strawberry plants, cucumber plants.
Nice.
And yeah, we have chili plants currently. And our idea is to put them out so that people in Longyearbyen can come and get a plant and finish growing it at home and get to eat their own strawberries at home or their own cucumbers. So that's something that's coming for spring this year, and we're super excited about. But we want to expand our portfolio, absolutely. But we have to really test out the yields. And in terms of growing proteins and grains, well, proteins, we can't really have animals, for instance, up here in Longyearbyen. So husbandry is outlawed in a way to protect the environment. We do have reindeer that roam free around us and are a source of protein for the locals. And grains, it's quite hard to grow grains in this environment because they need a lot of space, right?
Right.
But we are thinking on ways, very innovative ways we could grow things such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, and root vegetables.
Oh, that's great. That would be really wonderful. I love that you're thinking of, having strawberries and cucumber plants that locals can come and get and then finish growing in their own home. I mean, if I was a local, I'd be really excited about that.
Yeah, we did a poll on Facebook to ask them what they wanted, and the strawberries won by a mile.
I can imagine.
We'll have Arctic strawberries soon.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there a bigger vision beyond just this project in Longyearbyen? I know I've read on the website and on your Facebook page that Ben has this vision of opening a zero waste restaurant and, just moving continually towards this circular economy around food production. But is there a vision that goes beyond that? Yeah,
there's absolutely a vision. And I think this is what the whole team shares at the moment. It's Ben's vision to go beyond just supplying a few restaurants with microgreens. And we really want to get into awareness and education and giving people the tools to grow their own food, And that might not be on an individual scale, but to help communities build a stronger, more resilient food systems. And we are working on this methodology for the zero waste restaurant, which we hope will help other restaurants become zero waste as well, So in everything we do, we are putting a spin to it on thinking a bit more systemically. So, okay, we did this and it worked. How can we adjust it to fit a small scale shop, a small scale restaurant, a small community in the middle of Norway that faces similar challenges despite not having such an extreme environment. So everything we do at the moment, we think about scaling, but not scaling it up too much that it just becomes another, in a way, wasteful production system.
Right. It's like scaling with intentionality so that you never lose that initial vision of why this whole company was started, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really wonderful. I'm so thankful that you've spent this time with us today, and I've learned so much, and I can't wait when we can travel again and I can come back up and visit the lab and visit the new location of the dome, which by then probably will be up and running at the rate we're going right now with travel. And I hope that this was really informative for the listeners, because I'm certain that a bunch of people who are listening have been up to Longyearbyen and seen the dome and kind of scratched their heads and gone, what's happening over there? And now they know. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope that also some of the listeners will make a point of trying to get in touch when they come through town. And if the plan is to open up more education and that kind of thing, then possibly some tourists might be able to come by and learn more.
Well, we hope that, and we hope everyone is safe wherever they are, and that when they do decide to come up here, that the situation will be under control, and that we can receive you all in the new location.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Alexia, and we'll see you up in Longyearbyen.
Thank you. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Antarctic Stories. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you have an extra minute, leaving a rating or review for the podcast will really help us in reaching a wider audience. Antarctic Stories is a production of Twin Tracks Expeditions, a family-run agency of polar guides who have spent the last decade working on polar expedition ships. We bring you unparalleled insider expertise in small ship voyages to the Arctic and Antarctica, and we love sharing our insider knowledge to help you find the perfect ship for your next polar expedition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or at twintracksexpeditions.com.